South Africa may gun for 2 of the 6 available positions of African Union commissioners. That's, of course, if the wishes of Naledi Pandor were to come true. The wishes contained in a recorded farewell speech the former minister has made to diplomats and departmental staff. DECO officials, however, say the speech is customary and doesn't mean the minister may not return if President Cyril Ramaphosa decides to reappoint her. Following the ANC's less than stellar performance in the election, Pandor hasn't made the cut. Ramaphosa, though, can use his prerogative to reappoint her to both cabinet and her previous portfolio.
I hope that you are going to ensure that we have at least 1 or 2 commissioners appointed to the new African Union Commission. Knowing your power in lobbying effectively, I really would want to see South Africa represented at that level, just as we've done so marvelously with the International Court of Justice and many other institutions of the United Nations. Let us take our place in the African Union and help to steer our own Pan-African organization to greater success.
To discuss Dr. Naledi Pandor's tenure as Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, I'm now joined by Thembisa Fakude, who is a senior researcher and director at Africa-Asia Dialogues. Good afternoon, sir. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I found those comments particularly interesting because not since Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was the chair of the African Union has South Africa gone for any positions.
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting one. And Naledi Pandor, of course, has been very, very forthright in terms of her intention of us having serious contribution towards not only the African foreign policy from the AU perspective, but South African foreign policy weighing heavily and influencing and shaping the position of the African continent, particularly when it comes to matters of the African continent's outlook towards the West.
I mean, there's a sense, certainly among people who have been watching this space, that since the departure from the scene of former President Thabo Mbeki, South Africa hasn't really sort of occupied the space that it used to occupy during his tenure.
Indeed, in Africa, yes, arguably so. But I think we've seen the South African position on international, at an international level. First was the position of South Africa when it came to the war in Ukraine, or the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We saw a South African very strong position, given, of course, that we are part of BRICS. So we were pro-Russia, even though, of course, the DECO will argue that we've always had an unaligned position, but our rhetoric and those from DECO indicated that South Africa was fully in the court of Russia. When it came to Palestine, again, South Africa had a very serious position, taking Israel to ICJ. So we've seen South Africa flexing its muscle, and I think in the tenure of Naledi Pandor, South Africa has gained some respect. Now, when you travel to various parts of the world, particularly in the Middle East, if you say you're South Africa, people remember and know, outside Nelson Mandela, that we've had a very strong foreign position, particularly when it comes to matters impacting Palestine-Israeli conflict.
But on the continent, though, have we flexed that muscle?
On the continent, we haven't flexed that muscle by going against Faki Mohammed, who is the secretary of the African Union Commission, after he attempted to bring the Israeli ambassador through the back door. But other than that, we haven't been seen noticeably advancing the African foreign policy, as you correctly put it, Thabo Mbeki did. So I agree with you, we have not been very vocal. In SADC, we have been to an extent. Now that we've sent our troops, for example, to Cabo Delgado, we're involved with the the troops in the DRC fighting M23. So when it comes to SADC, I think we have been much more vocal and active. But when it comes to other matters in the African continent, we have not been that active.
Would our influence wane because of that, so to speak?
I think so, but I don't think our influence will wane. I think there's a lot to celebrate from South Africa, and the admiration of South Africa, particularly post these elections, is likely to impact on our standing in our most democratic country in Africa, and we've displayed that not only through elections and the inauguration of a president, but at the same time, the speech of President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday continues to articulate that position. And I think we are going to be even much more active. I mean, what he said yesterday in terms of what he sees South Africa to be playing henceforth, for me, suggests that we are redirecting our attention away from the Middle East, but it's going to be Africa for the next coming 5 years. It did not mention anything controversial, and one would have, of course, expected that was going to mention our continuation with our case in ICJ and other things associated with it. But I think the speech that he delivered yesterday concentrated much on what South Africa intends doing in advancing socio-economic matters and ambitions in Africa.
On that international front, though, does South Africa's influence go beyond the case it brought before the International Court of Justice?
I think so. I think the DRC puts South Africa in a much more interesting position. Of course, we're losing life and it's an expensive war, but the fact that we're there, I mean, the DRC conflict has brought in not only African players, but even international players who are interested in the minerals in that part of the world, and South Africa is there. The conflict in Cabo Delgado, again, it looks as if it might just become a sub-Saharan conflict, and South Africa is there playing a very important role. So we are there flexing our muscles, and I think we'll have to wait who's going to be appointed as the new minister at DERCO. If Naledi Pandor does continue, South Africa is likely to continue the trajectory that it's embraced in the sixth administration. But if it doesn't, of course, I think Cyril Ramaphosa will want to be the one controlling and directing the foreign position of South Africa moving forward.
Well, certainly from people in the know, it would seem that she could well be back in that position. But what is it about her specifically which gives South Africa the edge it needs on international relations?
I think she's quite confident. She knows what she's talking about, and she's articulate, and people like that, of course, and she's been very clear in her articulation of positions, particularly on the two matters that I've mentioned, one being the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the other one, of course, has been Palestine. And her likability and articulation, I think, has put South Africa in a different position. And that's why I think she has got that support, and she's been very brave, particularly in the matters of Israel, where the entire world has been very careful in terms of criticizing Israel. South Africa was the first country to actually really tackle Israel and, head on. And I think that has gained her some kind of image of a strong lady. And many people in South Africa would like to see her coming back. And that is, I think, her currency at the moment within government, but also within the international relations globally.
But do you think her own comrades sort of recognize what it is that she brings on the table? And I'm asking this because, I mean, she didn't make the cut, of course. I mean, there are many casualties of the ANC's electoral performance. But do they recognize her and subsequently give her the sort of support she deserves, that which will put South Africa on a map?
Clearly not. The fact that she didn't make the cut and now she is largely dependent on Cyril Ramaphosa's prerogative to bring her back into the fold suggests that she's not appreciated by her own comrades. But you must also remember that there's a lot of contestation within the ANC. And I think the attention that she has received, not only within the ANC, but also globally, I'm not quite sure whether it sits well with other comrades who are not sharing the spotlight, because at the moment, she's the one who's shining the spotlight on all of these events. And with the competition of politics, I'm certain that there's a number of other of her comrades within the ANC who would like to occupy her position, because apparently it attracts more attention than even the presidency of South Africa internationally.
Say she doesn't. Do you see people who are equal to the task who may be up there top in the list of ANC MPs who have made it to Parliament?
Oh yeah, I think there's a number of them. I think people such as Park Stau, who was sworn in yesterday, could easily occupy that position. People like Josietsu, Hopper, I believe that they can do a good job. But a number of female or women ministers who were involved in the sixth administration, I think they can do a very good job. The current minister of in the office of the president, Thembisa Fakude, I think that she's quite fit for purpose and she can occupy this position. So I think there's a number of people within the previous administration who have since been sworn in as a member of parliament who can easily occupy that position. But again, Naledi Pandor understands the job, and I think if she's given a second chance, she must just again do a good job.
Thembisa Fakude, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. He's a senior researcher and director at Africa-Asia Dialogues.